Hello, and thank you for watching us here at blackdoctor.org. I am your host this evening, Shamika Rhymes. Let me know in the chat where you are watching from, and make sure to share this with your network and drop any of your questions in the chat as we go along tonight, and we'll try to answer those. So, tonight we're taking a look at a critical issue affecting our teens: tobacco and vaping use. Over 2.5 million US middle and high school students reported using e cigarettes in 2023. And so the rise in teen vaping is alarming, with Black youth disproportionately impacted by its dangers. So it's time to clear the air and protect our future generations from this growing epidemic. So during tonight's panel, we're going to take a look at the hidden dangers of vaping and then some strategies to empower parents, teens, and educators. So let me introduce you to our panel of experts. So joining us tonight, we have Dr. Yolanda Lawson. She is the immediate past president of the National Medical Association. Hi, Dr. Lawson. And we've got Dr. Oliver Brooks, Chief of Pediatrics at Watts Health Corp.
Good.
Hi, Dr. Brooks.
Thank you, Shamika. Thank you for having me.
We've got Dr. Adam Goldstein from UNC Hospitals. Hi, Dr. Goldstein. And we've got Dr. Krista Wright. She's with the Center for Toxicology and Human Health.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, thank you for joining. I'm super excited about tonight's panel. And again, everyone in the comments, make sure you drop your questions and we'll try to get to those as we go along tonight. So I'm going to start this off. This is I'm just going to throw this question out there. And I think we're going to start with, I'm going to start with Dr. Brooks on this one. What are some current trends in tobacco and vaping use among Black teens, and how have they evolved over the years?
The Black youth use e-cigarettes or vaping somewhere in between the high and low. The highest use is Latinx, the lowest is Asian Americans. So we're kind of in the middle, and that also reflects on cigarette use. So we have, I guess, found the message somewhat. That being stated, we generally have higher rates of morbidity and mortality, problems with using these devices, the e-cigarettes and true tobacco. So over time, generally speaking, on a positive note, the use of vaping or e-cigarettes in the whole community as a whole, has diminished somewhat. So I think that we're getting the message. However, it is still out there, being used and having significant damage on the body, on the mind, on the community. So we're doing okay, but we're not there yet.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in? Dr. Goldstein. Oh, you have to unmute.
Yeah, I would agree with Dr. Brooks. I think it's still a significant problem facing the Black population of youth, because there's 5.5% of Black high school students and 5.7% of Black middle school students are using the product. This is affecting parents, teachers, school administrators, school resource officers across the country, and you all know it, and we know it. There's a lot more still we can do.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Wright, Dr. Lawson, what are your thoughts on the current trends?
I concur. Current statistics suggest there's a diminishment of vaping in the Black community and also in other communities. However, nicotine addiction is a serious issue, especially with this growing population. This population is still developing, and of course, nicotine addiction can occur and cause other issues, health issues that may be long-term and critical to the development of our Black youth.
Okay.
And I couldn't add much more to what my colleagues have already established in this conversation, but the piece about the evolution of it, right? So, we know how appealing these products can be to our teens and to our youth. And so as we think about that evolution, that we have to continue to press and raise this awareness. And so I'm really happy that we're having this conversation tonight, and really looking forward to an engagement that we get from our audience with questions, and hopefully from parents.
Okay. Well, I probably with this particular question because for those that are watching that may not know what vaping is or what an e-cigarette is, can someone explain what that is?
I'll take that. E-cigarettes are also known as electronic nicotine delivery systems. They are electronic devices that enable the aerosolization of e-liquids that contain nicotine at various concentrations, which then the user inhales. Now, the problem with this is they're not only inhaling nicotine, they're also inhaling harmful substances such as volatile organic compounds, some of which are known carcinogens. They're also inhaling heavy metals and also inhaling particulates, which can damage the lungs. So they're not only inhaling nicotine-laden aerosols, but other harmful substances that can alter their health.
Thank you for the explanation because I'm one of those
And
that
may I add to
didn't.
that, one thing that she didn't mention, which she obviously knows, which is painfully true, that what are they doing? They're inhaling nicotine, right? But when you do nicotine through an e-cigarette versus through tobacco, you get a higher concentration of nicotine going into the bloodstream faster. This can lead to more addiction and it can lead to more brain development issues. So nicotine does affect the teenage or the developing brain. Brain finishes development by age 26, not age 18. So then you layer that on the top of these Black youths, teenagers, are maybe going to lower graded schools, lower quality schools. They're in a worse environment. So you affect brain development and you get addicted by getting a rush, if you will, of nicotine, and then you layer all these socioeconomic factors on it. So I think that sometimes that aspect of it is not really well perceived, but it is in fact true.
Thank you. Well, that brings me to my next question. What factors contribute to the popularity of vaping and tobacco use in Black communities, particularly among teens? And, Dr. Brooks, you kind of opened the door on that one, so I'll let you kind of finish with that.
Yeah, so, and it's interesting because it kind of links the way that it is brought to us. Mm-hmm. It's cool. Okay. Your friends use it. It tastes good. They put flavors in them. In the Black community, there's some evidence that the price is lower than it is in other communities. It is sold as a novel product that is less harmful than a cigarette or not harmful at all. So, and we're talking about teenagers. So all these things are very much an allure to a younger person that's, teenage, 13 to 18, 19 years of age. More so, I won't say more so in the Black community. I kind of feel that they try to make it more in the Black community, but this is a general problem, but we always seem to have the worst complications related to these things that happen in our society.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Lawson, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I would just add, I agree. I feel there's very effective social media campaigns that are taking up. It's the targeting of the marketing to our communities, to our teens, to our children. I can also say that can be this misperception, right, that it's healthier than tobacco smoking. And certainly I find that those adolescents that may have ongoing or mental health challenges or depression, be struggling with those things, can use it as a tool, right? A coping tool. But, so as I'm counseling patients all the time, right? Sometimes we choose coping tools that aren't the healthiest choice. And so those are just some of my concerns in regards to those factors.
Okay. Dr. Goldstein?
I would add that the misperceptions, this is an opportunity for parents to really address with their kids. There's a misperception about safety, that the products are safe. They're not safe. Whether they're better or worse than cigarettes is really the wrong question. They're not safe. And why would you choose then to do something? A misperception about addiction, that they're not addictive. In fact, they can be quite addictive. And so one of the problems is we have kids sitting in classrooms around the country who are addicted, and yet we're penalizing the kids versus penalizing the industry that pushes the drug on the kids. And finally, Dr. Brooks mentioned the flavors, and there's a misperception here about, that these flavors are starter products. We've done research that shows that they make kids think that they're less harmful, they're more likely to try them. And then you combine that with a marketing that uses all kinds of things like sexuality and around social influences and peer pressure that really encourage this as if it's a harmless issue. So I think this is dangerous, and I'm really, really glad we're having this conversation.
And I'd like to add to that, there's a misperception that it's only harmful or not safe for themselves. There's also the bystander effect due to secondhand vaping that people are not aware of. And research that we've conducted at Chemical Insights Research Institute suggests that secondhand vaping can be just as harmful as primary or firsthand vaping, what the user experiences. And so there's this misperception that it's cool to do it around my friends, but your friends are being subjected to harmful substances as well.
Okay, thank you. Where are these teens getting these from? I know back in the day you had to go through some hoops if you were trying to get cigarettes. And I know my parents are watching now. I didn't do it, but how teens are now. Is that the same thing? They're just going through, someone older that they know, or just using fake IDs. Like, how are they able to get these products?
They have Cash App.
Good point.
They have money.
Good point.
They do. And Dr. Brooks pointed out this earlier that, there's a lot of targeting in our communities, and in every corner store you go in, you'll see a large amount of vaping products that are available, different colors, different brands, different flavors, which entice teenagers to seek out Cash App, seek out others, family members to purchase it for them. I've also had anecdotal evidence that they're taking it from family members and using them if they find them. And so that's a major issue, and awareness is key. Ensuring that the kids know that these are not toys, and they are harmful substances and harmful products that can affect their health.
Okay. Well, since you mentioned that, the next question is how does advertising and social media influence tobacco and vaping use among Black youth? I know that just, Dr. Wright just mentioned that walking into these corner stores that there's the advertisements, but what else about social media and advertising? I'll go with you, Dr. Lawson. We'll start with you.
So again, I think they have really done, others could probably follow the playbook on this effective social media campaigns, how to construct social media, knowing the platforms that adolescents use, all of that. So they've done a tremendous job in really curating their marketing for the particular population. So they're clear, right? And, as you just mentioned, where are they getting it from? You think about some of these social events, I'm here and I know some of the nightclubs, there's promos and there's free, right? There's free product in these particular environments. And so, like you said, we've all said it's targeted, it's intentional, right? And it's well refined to the market that they know they want to pursue.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they will give donations to HBCUs. They will sponsor high school events. They will target in the community. Again, like I said, there are studies that show there are more retailers in the Black communities, and they spend a lot of their money directly marketing. If you go to 7-Eleven in the Black community, you will see signs say the names of their particular products, and it is a multi-billion-dollar business, and so they are experts at marketing. So they utilize all of these areas. You mentioned influencers, social media. That's very, very potent, especially with this particular population, the teenage population. So they know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Goldstein?
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to mention is when you asked about the marketing, it's not as if kids are going to the store and say, I want a vape. Right. They're saying, I want Elf Bar. And if you're a parent out there and you don't know what Elf Bar is, well, you better go look at it. It's the #1 brand among youth. It's not Juul. You know, I'm in North Carolina. We were the first state to sue Juul. We were the first state to settle with Juul. Juul's way down there. It's like #5. And after Elf Bar, it's Breeze. The name sounds like it is. You think about cool cigarettes and the marketing, but what about Breeze? And then the third most popular is Mr. Fog. Really? So if, you know, we have to get into these brands. We have to understand that people are buying this whole belief system. And then we can begin to say, well, the fog is the brain. That's the brain when it's vaping. The Breeze is your choice not to vape. And, you know, rather than Elf Bar, we could really have some sort of bar that's healthy and doesn't confuse people about really what it means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think if I had a child that said, I'm going to run in the store and get a health bar, I would think, oh, a protein bar. I wouldn't know. So thank you. Thank you, because I think that will help those watching knowing what their kids are talking about now.
And if they come home and say they're having a little USB stick or a little looks like candy thing that you could drink, that's probably some sort of vaping device. And by the way, those vaping devices, if actually drunken by these kids, it could be incredible toxicity. I'm sure Dr. Wright knows a lot more about that than I do.
Mm.
Absolutely. The levels of nicotine poisoning have increased since e-cigarettes have come on the market. And that's unfortunate, especially for smaller kids who think these are toys. And to Dr. Goldstein's point, there's other nefarious marketing tactics where they have created vapes that look like Game Boy systems, something that could be hidden from their parents so they could use them readily. There's also a vaping hoodie where they can vape in disguise in class. And I've heard anecdotal evidence from teachers around Atlanta that they've seen their students vaping in class. And so gone are the days where they sneak out to the bathroom to take a hit of their cigarette. They're doing it in class, which is another concern. But in Georgia, it's not only Elf Bar, it's Geek Bar and Puff Bar. And so if you hear those terms, those are vaping devices that are pretty popular here in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm. We have a question from the audience. Tasha Hosang says, I think another aspect, well, a comment, not a question. I think another aspect is it's easier to hide because there's no smell. That's a good point.
Well, it is. And it's highly concerning. Probably and I think Dr. Wright was going to mention this likely too. Just like she just mentioned the hoodies, it is so, it can be so innocuous, right? Mm-hmm. To be, to vape, take a few puffs and go about doing something else, right? You could be anywhere. And so, yes, the smell, it's very innocuous. It's not like a cigarette smoke, you know? And so it makes it very easy, which lends to the addictive potential, which is so concerning, highly concerning on the addictive potential. And, you know, this was sold as a way that was healthier. This is a alternative to for our tobacco smokers. But, you know, I would say clinically speaking, it's not a solution, right? There are still those long-term impacts that we all are concerned about equally.
Mm-hmm. Well, that brings me to my next question. What are the immediate and long-term health risks associated with vaping and tobacco use? Like you just mentioned, Dr. Lawson, there are some risks because it's not healthier. Can anyone talk about that, the immediate and long-term health risks?
So, yeah, I'll attempt to look at that. So immediately, it increases your heart rate and it increases your blood pressure, thereby increasing oxygen use on the heart. Now, most teenagers have a healthy heart, but that's stress. That's stress on the heart. And I don't even know if we know well enough over longitudinal studies what long-term that will do, but I just know that increasing heart rate, blood pressure, and stress on the heart is not good. And we mentioned the other things. So there are something called microparticles, which are particles that are 2.5 microns or less. They bypass the normal mucus in your respiratory system and deposit in the lungs. There's actually something called vaping, product use associated lung injury, that you just get injury from just the like getting hit by something, not even the chemical itself. Long term, you can get asthma, you can get scarring of the lungs, you can get organ damage, addiction. There are studies that show that those that vape are more likely to do cigarettes, so you can get cigarette smoking, that secondhand exposure, which was already mentioned. So these are some of the, I can almost say immediate. I mean, excuse me, a medium to long term, but it clearly is not innocuous. That was the word that Dr. Lawson used, and I think that that's another thing that the industry pushes is relatively innocuous. Vaping, e-cigarettes are not innocuous.
I'd like to piggyback on that. Another long-term effect could be oral health effects. I'm the PI on 2 NIH-funded studies trying to understand if vaping can cause early onset periodontal disease. And sure enough, we have found evidence that not only can vaping disrupt the oral cavity and cause gingival epithelial damage, but it can also offset the important microbial communities within the oral cavities that could offset periodontal disease development. And so what we found is that the good bacteria that protects our teeth are diminished in vapors, and the bad bacteria that causes periodontal disease is increased in vaping subjects or those who use e-cigarettes. So there is also oral health effects that we need to be cognizant of, or teens need to be cognizant of, because that can also lead to bleeding gums, higher tooth decay, tooth movement, tooth mobility, tooth loss. So that is another issue that is could be a long-term issue for teens.
Okay, thank you.
So what we've heard a multitude today. We've heard, I think earlier Dr. Brooks talked about some of the brain damage. Here we are talking about some of those short-term, immediate things, right? Yeah, maybe there's some coughing and throat irritation and those types of things. Here we are talking about oral health. Then we think about those long-term things, right? So while, yes, heart rate, blood pressure, but long-term impacts, some studies, there could be cancer development, cardiovascular disease. So many of these are quite aligned with some of the things, same things we talk about with tobacco smoking. So again, going back to those misperceptions that this is a safer alternative. No, those health risks still are there and they exist. And I think that as we think back, even looking at tobacco, I think it was 1964 that the Surgeon General, right, came out to say, and it was officially stated, smoking is bad for your health. How long are we going to have to wait this time, right? Before we really get this full endorsement and that this advertising and the targeting and that we can really, right, intervene and stop some of these things to stop this evolving addiction to vaping.
Dr. Goldstein, did you want to weigh in on any of the short-term, long-term effects?
Yeah, there's a long list. I mean, we didn't even talk about immune function. I think the big thing is loss, is the cognitive, the neurocognitive things that can happen with, impaired memory, impaired attention, really not in control. You combine that along with addiction, and I really don't know very many youth who want to not be in control. So a lot of times, because when we get and talk about quitting, they're going to have to want to quit. And our job is going to be to motivate them to want to quit. And we have to know the science. We also have to know how to motivate people. And we also have to be there for them. And I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little while.
I saw a comment that I wanted to go double back on that said, we can talk about stress or other reasons that they may want to vape to release in the first place. So what are some other reasons that teens are looking to vape? I mean, we talked about peer pressure, but what else could there possibly be to make them want to do this?
Earlier, you heard me mention around some mental health, whether it's depression, ADHD. It could be some of these things. Again, people are using smoking, right? Vaping to cope, right? Again, stress, had a stressful day. We know that can be a driver for people to utilize items such as vaping to cope with, whether it's depression, anxiety, ADHD. stress, all of it. It's still not a healthy coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I would say that the teenage brain, and again, it's important. Dr. Goldstein mentioned that. I really want to underscore that the teenage brain or teenagers, they are looking to explore their world. So that's where you see them experimenting with drugs, driving fast, drinking too much, unprotected sex. So it goes along with being a teenager. This is actually theoretically normal development. But when you put things out there that are not part of normal development, you're going to have some adverse outcomes. And the other one is, again, I mentioned before, but peer pressure. Peer pressure is the most intense generally around the teenage years. A teenager wants to fit in. And one of the things that studies have shown that it is more likely for a teenager to vape if their mother, their sibling, or their friends vape. So it's like a multiplicative event. If I can get a kid, his friend to vape, then his friend will vape, and then the friend's friends will vape. So the industry understands this. I believe they understand it better than we do. So that's just part of development. And unfortunately, it's happening with a device that is toxic, basically.
Mm-hmm. That just brought to mind something else. Sharing the vape. What kind of health risks are involved in that? I mean, I could think of a few, but if they're sharing the same vape and passing it around with their friends or whoever.
Right. So I don't know if they do that a lot. Dr. Wright or Dr. Goldstein may, but obviously here we are in the respiratory season.
Yes.
So influenza, RSV, COVID, pneumococcus. And one thing that wasn't mentioned, was it mentioned indirectly by Dr. Goldstein? There are also studies that show that there are changes in the lung, not lung function, but the lung immune system, that certain viruses and bacteria will overgrow. So it's just amazing when you start to look at all the things that can happen. But you add someone who has early influenza, then they hand this to someone else who's been vaping, their lungs are more vulnerable to viral diseases than to get influenza. Another one, meningococcus, but we don't have to get technical. But it's like passing around the bottle, or the joint.
Right.
It's just yuck.
and it is a problem because, first of all, vapes can be expensive, so kids will share them. Mm-hmm. All you need is one kid to give access to them. And, we do a lot of work in enforcement and compliance when kids go into stores and try to buy them. And all you need is 1 out of 10 to sell. And everyone knows where that is in the community. And normally it's not really below 30 or 40%. So you got a lot of non-compliance, but as they're sharing them, there is no limit to, you could get 50,000 vapes on a device. You can get thousands, tens of thousands, and it doesn't go out. So it could just keep being shared. And you could have, instead of one, you have 5 different people who are having a sharing episode, all of whom may well be addicted. It's a problem.
Absolutely. Well, do you think Black teens are adequately informed about all the health risks that you all named? Do you think they even are aware? And if why or why not? Why, or what would be keeping them from being aware, I guess, is the better question, the awareness aspect of it. And that anyone can answer that question.
I mean, I personally definitely don't feel they're aware, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think Dr. Goldstein and maybe Dr. Brooks mentioned it earlier. I mean, there is definitely a role on educating parents. There's a role, I believe, on educating school nurses, right? I think schools can do and have resources, making sure that they're armed with resources to help their student populations. And, whether kids see the doctor or not, for me, it's part of that preventive health assessment, right? So oftentimes, even parents may not know their child is vaping, right? That's not unusual for us to divulge information through our interactions, right, with a child or an adolescent in the exam room, and be able to address that. But we also have to do a good job of making sure we're asking the question to open up the conversation, so then you can begin the education with that child.
I agree with Dr. Lawson. It starts with education and awareness, and to dispel myths and misperceptions around vaping, firstly. Secondly, I do believe there's a lot of educational resources that are out there, but they're hard to find somewhat. So to address that issue, at Chemical Insights Research Institute, we've developed what we call the Science, Education, and Research on Vaping and Interventions for Community Engagement, which is an acronym that stands for SERVICE, the Service Guide. And we aim to share this and disseminate it broadly with Atlanta high schools and high schools across the nation to ensure that educators, and as Dr. Lawson mentioned, school nurses will be more aware of the hazards that lie within vaping, and they can share those broadly with students. But again, it starts with education, because when you know better, you can do better.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I want to remind everyone in the chat that if they have questions, please drop them in there. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I want to say there's one area where I think we haven't mentioned, but I think it's relevant about education, which is about dual use, because dual use, using vaping and another product, and in this case with Black youth, a lot of it's going to be cigarillos and cigars. That is as frequent as single use for many youth. And so if we go too far, banging on one without recognizing that we got to do even more than that, and let them know that, again, combustible tobacco, not safe, vaping, not safe, the combination actually even worse. And then how we combat that, we're doing some interesting work creating Instagram-like campaign to discourage Black young adults from cigarillos. And we're really focusing on, Black community leaders, athletes, musicians, influencers. What are the community values that are important to the Black youth? And we want them to know that it's their health, and also it's their community, and they can protect both at the same time.
That's great.
And I think that also something that was mentioned earlier, vaping, kids that smoke cigarettes, when they came home, you could smell it on them. You don't smell the vaping vapors when your child comes home, your teenagers. So there may be less pressure from the parents to even try to say, look, you're vaping, and I just saw this thing on TV that said vaping's not good for you, or I understand that some of your friends do it, but I didn't know you were doing it. So I think that it is easier to hide. And I think that's part of the education is that not even the awareness of who actually is vaping. So there are signs of vaping. One of the main ones is changing in behavior, but then there's some fruity smell you can get. They can have moodiness. You actually find increased thirst in teenagers that are vaping. So I think that that's another component of it, that it can be done kind of, I won't say in the shadows, but it is more difficult to detect than cigarette use.
Okay. Well, have there been any strategies that have been successful in reducing tobacco and vaping use among Black teens? Again, and I'm throwing that out to the group. Anyone can jump in on that one.
Well, I'm just going to say, as I live in Dallas, and I'm really proud to state that just recently, Dallas passed a city ordinance to ban indoor vaping. And that includes parks in all indoor and enclosed spaces. So I think policies, yes, that's really good. Yeah. So this is hot off the press last week. This happened about 6 days ago. Really proud, but we have to continue to advocate for policies such as that, to put protections in. I mean, typically with like tobacco, increasing taxation, we've seen all of these things from structurally to try to curb the tide, if you will. But I'm really proud to just share that, at least, because typically I live in a place where policies such as that usually don't get passed. I'll leave it at that.
So, and that's true. I mean, well, we all kind of have that feeling, Dr. Lawson. I don't live in Dallas, but I've heard of the city and the state, I might add. So, another strategy that is felt to be effective is exposing the marketing tactics of big tobacco or those that produce and sell e-cigarettes. So, making it clear to teenagers, but that's the Black community, not just teenagers, the family, the teachers, people mentioned school nurses, that they're targeting you. Go online, I'll tell you, go look and you'll see it, young person, and let them understand that they're being used almost. And just by showing them this and directing them toward the fact that they're being used, uh, TikTok, YouTube, all social media, uh, that helps. But then using that against them, obviously, it was stated, use influencers, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, to show positive messages to these teenagers. Not say positive messages, but the harms of it. A negative message is use e-cigarette. A positive message to me is not use e-cigarettes. So that it has to be one of the ways to go, because that's where they consume their information.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I also think we can ramp up that policy work, right? We can ramp it up when we see a success in Dallas. Listen, I mentioned before, North Carolina, the #1 tobacco producing state in the country, and we got a lawsuit settled against Juul. And that money goes into public health. It goes into school systems. It goes into helping people quit. And those types of models can be done. We can ban disposable vapes like Elf Bar. These are the cheaper ones, and they get thrown away. We can put warnings on those products. We can work on elimination of vaping in schools anywhere, anyplace, anytime by students, faculty, visitors. A lot of things. Dr. Brooks mentioned the marketing restrictions. We can even raise the taxes on the products. Just takes where there's a will, I think there's a way.
Absolutely. I guess that already answers the question. My next question was about policymakers addressing the disproportionate impact of tobacco and vaping marketing. But what role should community voices play in shaping those policies? Dr. Lawson, I'll start with you.
Certainly. So I work part-time in a community-based organization, and we have actually an after-school program. And we actually, a lot of our population are transgender youth or the LGBTQ youth. And so using the opportunities, right, when we have programs like our after school, because I strongly believe, especially when you're talking about the adolescent, it needs to be accessible to them. Really, it needs to be digital. It needs to be free, and it needs to be at their level. And then secondarily, I would add again, just really school based and making sure our schools are supported in these efforts too. Schools need to have anti-vaping policies. Schools need to have educational materials. Schools need that level of support.
Okay. Anyone else?
I love that, Dr. Lawson. I myself created a program to educate teachers as well as students about the hazards of vaping. We invite teachers to Georgia State University to learn about different aspects of vaping and the harmful substances that are created during the use of ENDS usage. But mainly, we're trying to educate and instill the value of research around vaping. And we try to instill in the kids, the scientific method, but also understanding the risk associated, exposure level risk, but also health related risk associated with vaping. And then in turn, the teachers take that back in the fall because it's a summer program. And so they are able to share this information with students during the fall semester as well. And so that program has been going on since 2019. And we're proud partners of that program at Georgia State University called the Empower Program.
That's
Good for
great.
you. Good for you. And also, in adding to all of this, I would submit that there's not a great fund of knowledge in healthcare providers about the dangers of vaping. they'll know in general, if is it better to vape or not vape? Okay, not vape. But what are the true dangers of vaping? So as a pediatrician, one thing that we do as part of standard of care is to screen for tobacco use, vaping use, drug use. So when I find someone that is vaping, I can give them clear information in 60 seconds. I'm not going to lecture them. But studies show that in general, a healthcare provider's recommendation or statement is the strongest inducer of a change in behavior. So we need the health care community to come out in a more robust fashion speaking against vaping in the language in which a teenager can understand it, but with a clear message that this is not innocuous. I keep going back to that because I believe that these teenagers really do not believe that vaping is really that bad for them. So that's one of the other strategies, and that's how we have to get the communities more involved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just want to say to Dr. Brooks, I really appreciate, we frequently say, what can you do in 15 seconds, which is a single, strong, unequivocal message and that you're there to help them. What can you do in 15 minutes, which is maybe some intensive counseling, maybe some pharmacotherapy if they're addicted, maybe. And then what can you do in 15 days? Well, that's an advocacy campaign. But we can work on so many different levels simultaneously, and I'm motivated to do more after hearing all of you with what you're doing. So I want to thank you, Dr. Wright, for sharing your work, especially.
Mm-hmm. I just want to add one thing as we're talking about schools. I just want to be clear. I'm talking about even colleges, because I think college campuses are ripe with opportunities, especially in this day and age. Whether it's vaping, whether it's cigars, I've never seen so many cigar bars. It's a lifestyle brand now. Many of these, whether it's vaping or what, we're talking about it's socialism and it's a lifestyle, right? And so things, whether it's cigarillos, cigars, vaping, it's sold as a lifestyle brand. And so it's really hard and challenging to come against that with some health messaging, because young people tend to think they're invincible. Right. And so that's why it takes all of our efforts, not only us as healthcare, I'm talking about all of our surroundings, parents. It takes all of that to get that message through and through. Because, as a teen, you really do feel invincible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like, everything as a teen. Yes.
And they're too old. They don't understand.
Right. Well, what role do the parents and caregivers have in promoting this awareness? For the parents that are watching, what advice can you give them if they suspect maybe their teen is vaping, or if they're trying to prevent their teen from vaping?
So first of all, you come to where they are. You will not be successful if they don't do it. What we teach and what I've learned is that you have to find out why they're doing it, and each child is slightly different. One might be because I'm kind of an outside. I want to fit in, so I'm doing it. Another one, I makes me feel good. Nicotine has it's a drug, and it gives a feeling of well-being. So they at that point may be addicted. So you find out. If you can find out that your child is vaping, find out why they're vaping and try to reach them there, but also show them resources. There are resources to help them get away from it. I mean, Dr. Golson even mentioned pharmacotherapy. They may be not so far gone, but nicotine is extremely addictive. They may need help. I think step one is understanding that there's a problem, and then step two is finding a solution. If they have to go get some help out in the community, find someone who quit. I know someone who was vaping, they stopped. Let me talk to them. Something like that.
And what Dr. Brooks suggests is so important because it says, I don't know everything. As a parent, I rarely knew anything. As a doctor, I've got to be able to say, help me understand. And I love those 3 words, and I encourage all our listeners to use those words. Find out what you don't know. Listen. That's the first critical step to forming a therapeutic relationship as a parent, as a school teacher, as a provider.
Awesome. I'd like to add too, when you do find a problem with one of your teenagers, it's really difficult to make them quit cold turkey. And so perhaps modifying their use, don't take it away initially, but try to modify their use, because you may unintentionally cause additional problems when you try to take away their vape. But examining their vaping behavior is one thing too, ensuring that they lower their frequency of use, and then shortly cut off the vaping and access to the device. I think that's a solid policy as well.
Okay.
The only thing I would add is I believe that parents educate sooner than later, right? Mm-hmm. So I think you're educating before you go to high school, actually, right? I was just recently asked this question around when should you have the conversation with your children around sex? I say 6 years old. I'm an OBGYN though, so I say by 6. So I think in elementary school, when we started talking about some of these health implications with vaping and cigarette smoking, it should be a broad discussion, right? Mm-hmm. We need to be having these conversations earlier, not when they're just a senior and when you think that your mindset, what the age appropriate that they may begin to indulge in these types of products or lifestyle. So I think sooner than later, and starting early, just on the education piece, is so important. I think oftentimes we start too late trying to educate, or we're trying to correct a problem that's already been started.
Yes, education is the first prevention, right? Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Gosh, this conversation has been so good. We're at our last question. How can we empower teens to become advocates against tobacco and vaping use within their communities?
Well, I would say this: find certain teens, certain individuals have that advocacy in them. Mm-hmm. And I think the best one would be someone who vaped and quit, because they've been through it. Mm-hmm. And then that would be hearing the message from my peer, not from my doctor, not from my mother, not from a community-based organization. So let's say there are, I could identify 100 vapors, teenagers, 10 of them, 15 of them quit. 2 of them would like to be an advocate. You would have to incentivize them. You'd have to train them. I think even probably give them some small remuneration. Teenagers, Absolutely. $50 goes a long way to a teenager. At least for me, it was $10 went a long way. But I would find someone who's gone through, because not only will they have the best message, but they will be the most likely to be successful in terms of being accepted by those that are now vaping.
I agree. Peer-to-peer interventions are very successful. And we've done that with our Empower program, in which our students that participate in the Empower program go back to their schools and share the information they've received about vaping, and trying to provide some type of intervention if they do acknowledge or identify a peer that is vaping.
Yeah, I think authentic voices are so key and critical. And, a lot of times I may not be the most authentic voice. I'm an authentic physician, and people do trust that. And I might say, I don't speak to your cultural experience. I don't speak to the stresses that you may be experiencing, but I can listen and I can hear it. And again, I can be with you with your journey. And I think some of that humility of, again, we're all in it together. Again, whether it's vaping, we haven't even mentioned blunt use, whether it's other unhealthy behaviors, because sometimes the vaping leads to other things. Mm-hmm. And so we're trying to stop it right at the beginning. And boy, I'm excited hearing some of these great suggestions from my colleagues.
Mm-hmm. And so the only thing I would add, I think all of my colleagues here have addressed what we do one-to-one with the patient. But I think with us, we're all tied to broader organizations, entities in our communities. And so I think our role a lot of times is that policy piece, right? just advocating on behalf of our children, our communities, and families, and what we can do to advocate for, placing more restrictions on the flavored products and such. So I think that it's an approach that has to have multiple facets and tactics around it. And so I think each of us have those one-on-one tactics with our individual patients, those broader tactics in our community, and then the tactics we utilize on state or federal level to impact policies. I think it takes all of that.
Absolutely. This has been like a wonderful discussion, and I see that everyone in the chat has been loving it. I've seen so many amazing comments where, some of that our parents are saying they had no idea even about secondhand vaping, how it could be dangerous as well. So thank you all for joining us here on blackdoctor.org. It's been an absolute pleasure. Everyone, for more information on the risks of tobacco and vaping use, you can head over to blackdoctor.org for more articles and resources. But thank you to our partner, Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, and make sure you check out the website there. It's tobaccofreekids.org, and you check out their resources there. Again, it's www.tobaccofreekids.org/US-resources. So thank you again. It's been a pleasure. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.